Running is more than just exercise. For many of us, it shapes our identity, our routines, our friendships, and even our sense of self-worth. So when injury strikes, particularly long-term injuries like bone stress injuries, the impact reaches far beyond the physical. In this episode of the Rehab Runway, I'm joined by psychotherapist Freya Bronwin from the Reframe Sessions to explore the psychological toll of being sidelined. We unpack what happens when running is taken away, why injury can feel like a loss of identity, how clinicians can better support the mental side of rehab, and what both runners and health professionals can do to navigate long-term setbacks with more clarity and resilience. Freya, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Luke. It's great to be here.
Yes, I became aware of your work for the last 12 plus months. I know Bo, the stress physio, had shared some of your content, and then I heard you on the Strongest Stride, and yeah, really liked obviously your approach, and something that I think is really under recognized thing in both runners and also in health professionals. So, I'm really looking forward to exploring today, how these things, how injury can affect runners and also the health professionals that deal with them. But just tell us a bit about your background. How did you get to working with runners and athletes?
Yeah, so I'm a psychotherapist, as you said, living and working in Gadigal Land, Sydney. And I'm lucky enough to work in a really broad range of contexts. I work with individuals, families, teams, founders. But I have this special interest and specialist interest, I suppose, in working with runners and active humans when they're up against injuries, performance pressures, and also just the other challenges that life brings. And usually that's kind of underpinned by a period of change or transition. So I'll talk with people, get alongside people to understand where they are, where they want to be, and the patterns, stories, beliefs that might be getting in the way. And this specific work, working with runners, actually started off as a bit of a research project. I was trained as a psychotherapist, and I had this hunch that there was value in bringing some of these ideas to everyday athletes like myself. And I tested it out with some of the local communities and running clubs in the eastern suburbs, specifically working with and focusing on people who were injured at the time. And there was a real resonance. So from there it grew, and Reframe Sessions was kind of born, I suppose.
And so you a runner yourself or a sports person? You've
Yeah,
played,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I do a lot of running.
Good. And hopefully haven't had to apply too many of this to yourself, especially when it comes to the long-term injuries.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, yeah, I've always had these kind of two strands of my life, like an interest in and curiosity in people and a love of sports and exercise. And so top line, I was always kind of drawn to this population just because I get it.
Hmm.
And initially, that level of understanding was kind of understanding how hard it could be when you get a niggle and you start spiraling, and it might
Hmm.
just be a few days, but that feels like so long, or a race doesn't go your way. And
Hmm.
although you're not elite, it's not your job, it shouldn't matter. Your friends and family are like, come on, just get over that.
Hmm.
But it does matter.
Hmm.
And so I started to think there's something more in this. Like pro athletes have sports psychs.
Hmm.
Regular therapists may or may not get it if someone does have access to that. And there seemed to be this gap. And then just as I was starting this kind of research project, this idea, I broke my foot running on the track. It was a Voltron fracture just in that minute, broken.
Hmm.
And suddenly I really realized how vast this gap of support is, especially
Hmm.
for longer term. So when I started it, I was mainly interested in some of the shorter term stuff and the magnitude that brings. And then I quickly realized actually when you're out or sidelined for many weeks or months, and that whole piece of your identity, that part of your identity really takes a hit, what
Hmm.
happens? And experiencing that firsthand was probably one of the most helpful things that could have happened whilst I was kind of getting more stuck into this part of the work because you really feel it.
And we'll talk about that identity in a second. In terms of runners as a population, is there anything that makes them unique compared to the
Mm.
general population from a psychological point of view?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And part of me wants to say everyone's different and you can't really generalize runners. And I
Hmm.
suppose that might be, especially true as running as a sport diversifies. But because I do work in these other contexts, when I come back to my reframe clients, I do really see how strong some of the themes are in that
Mm.
work and in that population. And that might be, things like having a really high bar. So feeling very goal oriented, placing value on external measures of achievement or success. Like people who I see who are very into running might also have been very academic or have in their childhood applied that to other sports. So you can see this often, this kind of red thread through someone's life of having a high bar and living with that. And
Hmm.
those stories often permeate in their families, or they might have siblings that they were reaching towards, or peers in that way. Similarly, you might have sports or exercise as a tool to manage uncertainty. So people who tend to come across as maybe very disciplined, they kind of, they're kind of holding it all together. It's like illusion of
Hmm.
control or discipline that sports brings, and getting up early, doing that day after day after day after day, training. That's not a question. It's not hard. That's
Hmm.
not where the things are hard. So they have this sense of yeah, real kind of discipline, or
Hmm.
also maybe a really strong sense of identity around being sporty or being active.
Hmm.
And you can already see how, which we'll come to, why injury is hard because it threatens some of these things,
Hmm.
right? But I was also thinking, actually, just as I was saying then, it's worth noting these are the people who come to me. So there are many other kinds of runners too, and I might be less likely to see some of them. And you'll have your own sense of this, I'm sure, as a practitioner. Like, for instance, someone who might be susceptible to really overtraining
Hmm.
or really have a very tight grip on exercise. So when they're injured, they might not want to loosen that grip. They might find it really hard to pull back. Those people I'm less likely to see because they might not want to come and see me. That might be
Hmm.
too risky. So whereas the first group, they want to be really good at things, including rehab, including being injured, including therapy. So
Hmm.
probably the people I actually end up working with skew to a certain type of runner. And I really identify with that type of runner too.
Hmm.
But I wonder if I don't know if that resonates with you as a practitioner in terms of the different types of people that you see.
Yeah, it certainly is, and like you said, the like any sport, you see a variety of different personality traits within that, and even within the different subsets of running too. The differences
Mm.
between trail running
Hmm. Hmm.
and road running as well too. The
Totally.
differences between those, that certainly people are drawn to more to one. And I think, as you said, like, yeah, as a runner myself, and I like that structure and the pursuit of trying to better oneself as well.
Hmm.
So I think
Hmm.
I like that, where you can lay things out, and yeah, I think, as you said, in a life that can be chaotic and unpredictable, things happen around you. For a lot of people, that running does provide that certainty and that structure.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, going to that identity, runners do often identify, and I just did it myself as I'm a runner. I always correct people when they say, I'm not a runner, I just jog. I'm like, no, no, no. If you put one step in front of the other, you're you can call yourself a runner if you so
Hmm.
choose. So, but what is it about running that people identify that becomes part of their identity, rather than just it being a hobby?
Yeah, I think you've spoken to some of it already. Like it's a vehicle for so much. So you often see that it becomes a red thread through so many of the things people do in life. So imagine we all need a kind of certain set of ingredients to feel good in our lives. And running often provides a lot of those things. So a sense of connection and belonging, movement, structure, progress or goals. It then goes on to influence maybe what you eat and when you sleep, who you spend time with. And then I think even more these days with the prominence of social media and how run club cultures have grown, that sense of like belonging and being part of a
Mm.
tribe has just grown and grown and grown. And it just influences all of these different like pillars of life.
And I guess then there's good things and bad things to that, isn't there? That's
Mm.
and what psychological needs does running meet for people? What does it
Yeah,
give them?
I think it's a sense of yeah, belonging, community,
Hmm.
sense of, as you said before, like being good at something or getting better at something, that pursuit. Obviously, it's a huge kind of regulation piece. So around managing stress, managing emotions. And there's a whole there. I feel like there's 73 different tangents we could do on all of these things, but
Mm-hmm.
these are, there's the knife edge of how these affect an injury is running through our whole conversation, I think. But yeah, some really fundamental needs that are just part of being human, I think.
I did a random poll on a group of runners, that just the next 10 runners that came through my door at clinic one year
Hmm.
for Global Running Day. And I asked all 10 of them, why they run. And they're all from different backgrounds, some very competitive, others, more recreational. And every single one of them mentioned running for mental health. And
Yeah.
some that I was surprised to hear that. Like, I just thought that they enjoyed it. But every single one of them, every single 10 mentioned that. Like, has there been any research looking at that? I'm not aware of that. That's
Mm.
sort of examined, why runners run.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of research around, the positive effects on mental health. And I've
Mm,
noticed that I'm often drawn to other parts of this conversation. Like I was invited to do something with a running club a year or so ago, 2 years ago, around Mental Health Day. And as I was preparing for it, I was thinking it's too easy to get up there and say, hey, isn't running great for our mental health? It's like everyone in this
mm,
room knows that because we do it.
mm,
Actually, what's more interesting is maybe what people are not talking about, which is when you really lean into something, when you are in a community which has these standards, when you feel in some ways kind of compelled to keep pursuing, to keep progressing, where like how do we help each other notice when that's really helping us and when we might be tipping into something that feels a bit unhelpful? And actually, that's maybe more interesting. And even in opening up in that workshop, I remember opening up and asking people, uh, what are some of the challenges that you face by committing so much time and energy and love to running? And really interesting conversations came up around some of these things, pressure I put on myself to get these PBs, uh yeah, actually I'm really tired a lot of the time, but the sense of comparison that's coming, all of these other sides that's kind of like the underbelly. But absolutely, to your initial point, you can't take away from how helpful, a top line level being active and especially running is as a vehicle for good mental health. It's just being
mm.
really mindful of when you commit a lot of time and energy to that, that it's not kind of detracting from that in the end.
And so when does a healthy identity tip into being a fragile and a dangerous one?
Mm. I think it's a really good question. I think it's about, well, one hunch I've had over the recent period is if your identity becomes too singular.
Mm,
So if you're getting all of those needs through one thing and one thing alone, and your sense of identity is super strong, when that red thread that I talked about before is pulled by something like injury or something like a disappointing race result, everything can come crashing down.
mm,
And it's so important to build in other parts of yourself,
mm,
like the other parts that make you who you are, the other identities. Being multi-storied is a word from narrative therapy that I absolutely love, which is this idea that we all have these multiple identities. And you almost see in like primary school, say, we're way better at realizing some of these things. We have all these extracurricular hobbies, all these
mm.
things we do, all these friends we play with that might be, have similar or different interests or families to ours. And then we tend to kind of hone in. So the greatest antidote, I think, to having a kind of fragile running identity is having other things that make you
Mm.
you or being tuned into that.
And is there something that I guess runners could, now self-reflect on and think, what have I got in my life? Or is it, things that, a simple
Yes,
question that runners can ask themselves listening now?
it's such a good question. I think going back to that idea of what are the ingredients you need in your life to feel good,
Hmm.
and where are you currently getting those? And it might be, those fundamental things. Like for me, it might be connection, sense of growth, a sense of structure and like structure, all
Hmm.
these things. And just noticing, and it's not to say running can't hit all of those, but like, oh yeah, I've also got, for instance, this week I went out on my bike. I used to cycle everywhere since moving to Sydney. I haven't touched my bike in 2 years. And I'm not injured right now. I don't need to be on my bike. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick that back up. Same with swimming and do things also without my watch
Hmm.
that I can just enjoy for the movement and
Hmm.
because they're a part of me. So I'd think about that, like what do you do because you want to, because it brings you a little bit of joy, and maybe they're things you've not done in a while. Maybe they're things you did when you were much younger. Maybe they're things you've seen other people do and you're curious. Opportunities to play, to be creative. There's all these other things that we have to us. We're all multi-storied. We can just sometimes lose sight of it.
Hmm. Love that. And social media, and in particular Strava, it can be great tools, but they can also be harmful, can't they? Obviously, we're in
Mm,
Australia, we've gone through a process of banning social media for
mhm,
children under 15 because of the harms, and I think they're quite well known. But for runners,
mm. Yeah,
how do they, what role do they play in reinforcing that identity in good and bad ways?
it's such a good question, and I should caveat all of this with, I'm human too, and I'm susceptible to all of these things. So
We
I get
are.
it. And yeah, I think social media and Strava, I think in a nutshell, create a lot of noise that take us away from being in tune with our bodies and ourselves and put a lot of our focus on other people. So, for instance, you might be tempted, I'm often tempted to just round off the week. Maybe you're just a kilometer off it being a nice round number.
Yeah.
I'll just keep doing, I'll just make my
You
long
and
run a
everyone
little bit
else.
longer. Yeah. Or you might be like, well, they did this, so I'll do that. Or
Mm,
and then social media, especially, and this has been talked about a lot on social media recently, but just how things are normalized, how challenges and it's becoming normalized to do bigger and harder things, and I think that essentially often just takes away from how much we trust ourselves. And the same is true for watches, right?
mm,
You Again, I'll be the first person to I'll look at what my watch says my sleep was before I think, how did I sleep?
yes.
And we're outsourcing a lot of this trust in our
Mm,
bodies to other people and to data. On the flip side, I should say, of course, it's not all bad. And I think Strava and social media in particular really do help people in the running community feel part of something bigger
mm,
and feel connected to people. And Strava, I know from a practitioner point of view, is super helpful for tracking progress, right? For making sure we're not going balls to the wall one week and then nothing the next, and then increasing our likelihood of being injured. And it's a really useful tool for keeping an eye on things like that. But it comes with its challenges. So,
mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I've certainly made the recommendation to a number of runners in the past to remove their Strava because of that,
Mm,
they're always having that comparison, and again driving them too far, or when they they are injured and they're seeing what fun everyone else is having, and feeling
totally.
that's affecting them, or again asking after you've been on social media, how do you feel? Do you get off, you're scrolling on your phone, you feel happy and
Hmm.
fulfilled, or do you feel like, oh well, I feel worse as a result of that?
Hmm.
Is that something you've recommended to your clients before in the past, of just
Yeah,
get off it?
certainly to be aware. I think for injury, something can happen where at first you might be checking a lot, and then actually in removing yourself, people often feel a sense of liberation. I think I don't know if you've worked with people who've experienced that,
Mm,
where actually it doesn't matter, like it's not that deep, but we're so
yeah.
caught up in it. And then social media, yeah, the same. And I think having periods off it can be really helpful of just
Mm,
stepping back and thinking about. I think given a lot of your audience are practitioners as well, it's increasingly interesting as a conversation for us. And you're someone who makes such great content. That invitation and necessity at times to feel part of the conversation as a practitioner
mm,
and to be generating content and involved in content. And it's tiring, right? It's
mm.
hard when that's the algorithm is really working to pull you in, and runners and practitioners alike will be experiencing that, like what it feels like to be in the eye of that storm of everyone doing everything and you kind of being in the middle of it.
Mm. Going with the social media, and obviously there's been some quite well known instances where elite athletes have been received vitriol online on social media, and had an
Mm,
effect. I mean, Ollie Hoare was one of our Australian runners, and was on record saying that the social media abuse he received before a race was
mm,
responsible for his poor performance. So if,
mm.
in terms of the elites, are they the challenges that they face, versus recreational runners? It's
Yeah, it is such an interesting point, actually. A lot of the elites I work with, struggle with this because it's so easy for them to compare themselves to their competitors. There's so much data, or their competitors might be broadcasting what they're doing a lot or talking about their training. It's just everywhere. And then that's not even the comments people might have, right? But
Mm,
just that sense of comparison being elevated. And again, what a trap that is when you feel like you're on a stage, and what you're doing and what your competitors are doing is being magnified, or is so
mm.
easily accessible.
And I guess that would it be true in saying that, we spoke about before, reflecting other things that you have in your life, and for a
Mm.
recreational runner, that's, can often be their job, or, well,
Mhm.
that might not be the highlight of their day, but, family, friends, these
Mhm.
sort of things. But for an elite athlete, that's it. That's, that where that there's a risk that can be everything for them, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why I think in terms of the recreational runners and the competitive athletes and runners that I work with, in some ways they're really similar, and in some ways they're quite different, and that is part of it. Like there's so much for a competitive athlete. Or I should say, where everyone's competitive in some ways. For someone
Mm,
who's elite or pro,
mm,
there's so much weight tied to their racing performance and also the injury, and the
mm,
the threat it poses is therefore maybe bigger. On the flip side, I often find they've developed greater capacity for certain things too. So, for instance, they might be really skilled actually at like the mental skills in racing, or they might be really skilled at being adaptable around injury because they've already had to train that part of their mind or body a lot. But the threat for sure is bigger, and you see that play out.
and just then going on from that, so obviously the threat, having this identity, the threat is not then just on our fitness and losing fitness, but also threatens who someone believes that they are. It threatens
Hmm.
that identity, and
Hmm.
that's where I guess that's, one of the key things that you'd be dealing with then with runners is would a large proportion of runners that you see be off the back of injury, or it's
Yeah.
performance pressures, or what are some of the areas that
Yeah.
you're dealing with?
Yeah, people tend to come to me when their physio suggests that they come to me. So
Yeah,
usually
okay.
it's when they're injured, which is also why I kind of love this way of working, because there's always so many good reasons for all of us to not go to see a therapist. We're
Mm,
really good at finding good reasons not to.
mm,
And actually, often I will see someone and they'll say, "Oh, my physio's told me twice." And then I heard you on a podcast, and then I did that. Okay, I feel like
mm,
maybe I should try it. So, but often, yeah, it'll be when they're in the grip of an injury.
mm,
And they might not be, you don't have to be broken to
mm,
seek a bit of extra help. It's the same reason we don't ideally, we don't wait to be completely unraveled before going to see a physio. We don't
mm,
wait to be in a thousand pieces before going to the gym. Like there's all these things that actually in our life we're pretty good at being proactive and preventative around. But
mm.
there's some stigma, there's this idea around therapy that you have to be kind of broken to
Yeah.
go, and that someone else only goes because they're broken. And I
Mm,
just couldn't see it further from that. It's it's really like strength training for your mind and
mm,
soul. And it's great to do when you have some capacity. And lots of people also come when they have limited capacity and they're
yeah.
in a period of struggle. But that struggle might just look like, I've had this injury and I'm a bit gutted about it. And I'm
Mm,
finding it a bit hard. And my partner's fed up of me talking about it. And my friends
mm,
are like, I'm not being going to running clubs. So and that's just kind of where I am. And
mm.
it doesn't look like alarm bells. It just looks like someone not quite feeling themselves, and wanting someone else in their team to help them with that.
And as a clinician, like I can think of a number of times where, I've had a runner where that is their whole life, and everything revolves around it, and they might not be, they may have minor injuries that they're able to train through, but I guess it's almost like a train wreck in action, and that you're seeing that if this were to happen, like that this
Mm,
would just be devastating, and I guess that's the time that we'd want to be getting action and seeing someone like yourself, isn't it, before that
yeah.
happens? I guess from a clinician point of view, like how do we address that? And we'll talk more later on about,
Mm,
more clinician stuff, but whilst we're on it, how do we direct those runners and saying, look, I'm concerned that this is all that your life is, and if something were to happen, like how can we word that
I
and
think
bring
it's
that up?
often talking to someone like, how much does it worry you? How much, what would you do? How devastating would that be? And actually just asking some of those questions. I don't think you also need to scaremonger people for like either necessarily. It might be, I often find timing is everything. And
Mm,
as a clinician, you might think, oh, they might benefit from that. And you might be telling them that for 3 months and it's just not the right time for them. And then they'll
mm,
go when they go. But as clinicians, all we can do, I think, is say, hey, we know the research that having a multidisciplinary team is super helpful for
yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
And no matter where you are, and just at least knowing who you chat to doesn't mean you're doing that week in, week out, but knowing that you have that support can really help set you up for success
Mm.
wherever you are on that journey. And yeah, I think we can absolutely raise the questions, but ultimately people will go when they're ready.
Yeah, to take a bit of a detour from injury, and we'll
Mm,
return back to it. But from a performance point of view as well, too. Obviously, the benefit of dealing with yourself in helping with performance pressures. Can you maybe just touch on that for runners and the anxiety of racing and
mm.
the expectation.
Yeah, and again, it's a kind of multi-pronged approach. Like traditional sports psychology approach is very good at helping prepare runners for the mental challenges within a race, within a battle. And some of those techniques and ideas can be so helpful in say you're doing a training block for a marathon and you want to really make sure you're laser focused and skilled and feeling confident, just in the way you're feeling confident in your body and building confidence in your body, that you're building confidence in your mind and what your
Mm,
mind can tolerate and how you can rely on that. And then I would always hold that with the other side of the conversation of helping people explore, the uncertain things that might crop up. How do we manage uncertainty in a racing environment, which is kind of everything, really. That's
mm,
that's how it is. And those skills transfer to other elements of life too. But then also, or like locating that race within the bigger picture. And sometimes you have to be with people where they are, and this only comes afterwards. But thinking, if it didn't go to plan, then what? Or like the one question I often like to ask is, imagine, think of yourself on the starting line. What have you already gained from this chapter? What has the experience of this training block, this chapter been? What are you really proud of? What have you learned about yourself? Who has helped you along the way? Who have you gained along the way? People always kind of accumulate people and relationships in these
mm,
chapters. And actually, even just zooming out and thinking, yes, okay, the race is one piece of that puzzle, but actually, there's so much more to me and so much
mm,
more that I've already gained can really help. And then also that often will help people think, yeah, and actually, obviously I want to do everything I can to give it my best. But if it doesn't go to plan, it's not the end of the world.
mm.
And even elites will be saying that and will ideally be getting to that point. But you have to respect that right there and in that moment, that is
Mm.
the most important thing. And sometimes it's about just being there with a person in that moment.
Yeah, yeah, and that's again the timing of that. It's not everything in the
Hmm.
world. It needs to be very
Yeah.
careful, doesn't it? I remember
Hmm.
I'm a fanatical Collingwood fan, and I remember one particular time losing a grand final, and my wife said to me, she goes, football's not everything, and
Yeah.
that was not well timed. So
Yeah. Yeah,
again, you
exactly.
can be timing of that, but and what is the best thing to say? You're dealing with a runner straight after a race, and they're disappointed. What should we be saying?
Well, I try and, as with anything, when someone first comes to me, the first thing I'll always do is give those hard feelings space. And I've spoken about this before, that it's so tempting to jump in and try and fix things for people. Like
Mm,
that is what we're naturally wired to do. And actually, one of the greatest gifts you can give to someone is to say, hey, I see you're really disappointed. Should we talk about that? Like, why is that disappointment so big? Which part of it feels most disappointing? Just let it out, give it the mic, let it talk, let that part of you talk. And often in letting it out and really going through it, it can be like metabolized almost. It can be processed in some way. And I know you're a coach as well, so I'm sure you're used to kind of dealing with those
mm,
conversations with athletes as well. And that's not to say every friend or whatever, needs to be saying, oh, tell me about that. You might just say, I'm really sorry. I
Mm.
get it. Like, I really get it. And I'm sorry. And I've been there.
Mm.
And it's just not rushing to, there'll be another one.
No,
Don't
that's exactly
worry. Da, da,
right.
da. It's just
Yeah.
giving it space. Like, you have to really respect these big feelings, because I think I see this in all of the work. It's about running, and it's not. Like, it's
Mm.
never just about running.
Mm.
And that's what comes back to some of the things we were saying earlier. Like, running might be a vehicle for the way someone feels their sense of success and achievement, like they're doing something with their lives, that they're, progressing, that and if you've dedicated many, many months to something and it hasn't gone to plan, especially if you've ticked every box, done everything you thought you were meant to, and some variable got you on the day, and it all comes unraveling down. Yeah, it's about running, but it's also, that's a really big pull, that how you make sense of how you achieve in life and
Mm.
why that's so important and what will become of you if you don't. And
Yeah.
so usually underneath those big important feelings are lots of other things too. But in giving them some space, they can kind of evolve.
Mm. Fascinating. If we were to now, we're going back onto injuries again, and one of the news that I never like to deliver to my runners is bone stress injuries.
Yeah.
Usually an extended time off, and what makes these so hard from a mental health perspective for runners?
Mm, yeah. Well, other than they, take a while, it can take a while to heal. And often they're a result of someone really loving running and then having to take time off. So those are the kind of obvious things that make it hard. But below that, I think there's some really interesting common themes around blame or shame. So people
Mm.
often feeling to blame about why it happened, often because you, people unfortunately tend to experience multiple, if they haven't quite worked out why they're happening, they might keep falling into that trap. Then they might feel an magnified sense of blame and shame. This story around I'm broken, or this fear around this is just going to keep happening to me is even bigger. Um, there's the timelines that come. I think often
Mm.
they're helpful to have some sense of anticipated timelines, but naturally there's some human deviation from how people recover. I think that could be hard. Add social media to the mix, but
Mm.
this person over there is already on their bike, or this person's already doing this, or why am I being so slow? And then yeah, like that fear of re-injury and coming back, and that hypervigilance that often comes with the pain, which I'm sure you have your own lens on as a practitioner, of
Mm.
just how acutely aware people are of the pain and how they can
Yeah.
then get very caught in that trap of being nervous to progress. And actually on this, these are some of the things I've seen from working with people, but I also asked a bunch of people on social media several months ago, just put out like a questionnaire. If anyone's had a bone stress, answer these questions. And like, 40 to 50 people replied. And there was such a strong resonance in the themes that came back, and
Mm.
such universal themes. And, the story everyone is sharing is, it feels so lonely. I'm on my own
Mm.
here. And I was just like, wow, everyone is having these very unique experiences, but they're so connected to other people, and yet
Mm.
that's the challenge of injury. You often feel so sidelined. But yeah,
Mm.
these themes, I think there's more, but that's definitely some of them.
And that's certainly something when I'm speaking to health professionals dealing with runners, is that, the importance of trying to keep them involved in their sport.
Mm,
So whilst they might not be able to run, can they be down there, counting laps or times, or, down at
hmm
their track sessions, or, once they're able to, riding their bike around with their friends on long runs there, to try and keep them involved in the sport. And that's
mm.
something you'd recommend as well.
Yes, I think that's an interesting thing to pose to someone. Like, would that feel
Mm.
helpful and
Mm.
interesting? Some people, I think, actually, there's that period at the beginning, which might be shock and denial and frustration and like a clambering to be back in with the group. And then I think people often find their own groove, whatever that may look like. So it might be that they have a role within the group. It
Mm.
might be that actually they're reconnecting with other parts of themselves or other things, or finding it easier to be doing something different. And I always think it's helpful to ask at the beginning, like, if you were to think of this as a project, and what do you want to, what do you hope to be true by the end of this project?
Hmm.
And I remember when I had that longer term injury, I was thinking, someone actually, a colleague asked me, um, what are your best hopes for this time? And at first I was like, oh, to get back to running. And then I was like, actually, no, my best hope is by the time I can run again, I don't need it to feel myself.
Hmm.
And that became my North Star. What do I need to
Hmm.
do to feel myself today? And, having an element of movement in there is important, but then there's also all these other things to play with. And I asked a friend something similar, and she was like, to feel strong. I want to feel strong and powerful, and that I can do things. And people have all these different answers, and it's a really interesting question to ask.
And that, you mentioned feeling strong. Like, do runners, do they have a sense of fragility when they're not just bone stress injuries, but when they're injured and they can't do the things? Is that a theme that you do see?
Of
They don't
course,
feel
yeah,
as
yeah, yeah.
indestructible as they thought they were.
100%. That's the question, right? You feel that physically, you feel that mentally. This is ultimately, and again, there'll be so many parallels with what you see in your work, but I guess a lack of trust. You lose trust momentarily in your
Mm,
body. This thing that you is your armor maybe for so many things, and then you don't trust it, and then you have to rebuild that trust again
mm.
in yourself, but also in your body. So yeah, and then that's connected to self-worth and all of these other things, but it can definitely invite a sense of fragility.
And that, speaking of trust, then I mean, I just had just a message with one of my runners, and he's on his road back from a bone stress injury at the moment, and he the way that he explained it is, there's the fear of
Mm.
re-injury, of mistake is what he said, fear of making a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
How do we manage that? How do we deal with that fear of re-injury, and is it again, is it the guilt, like you mentioned before, the guilt of someone doing something wrong? Like, how do we manage this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to first normalize it. Like what's happening and the fear of re-injury is so normal because what pain psychology shows us is that your nervous system has detected and learned that injury is a massive threat. And your memory doesn't just switch off from that because your body starts getting better. So that fear, catastrophizing, what if it happens again? Will I manage? Especially if you've had, say, experiences of something like a bone stress in the past and you felt like you didn't manage. That fear of being stuck in that state and the hypervigilance to every niggle is so common, and it keeps that alarm system really,
Hmm.
really loud. And so this is where I love working alongside clinicians, right? So if someone's working with a practitioner that I really trust and I know they're in really safe hands, and then I can work alongside them with building that trust back up. So starting by making sense of that fear, normalizing it, exploring what ifs, really understanding, leaning into what is that fear telling us? And then kind of processing and separating some of these old pain memories from what your body can do now, and then rebuilding trust in these tiny progressive steps. And I think outsourcing trust as well to your physio, to your coach, can be really helpful too. So you can borrow their trust.
Hmm.
Like Bo, the stress fracture physio, was actually my physio. That's how
Hmm.
I first met him. And I remember him saying, like, his words of affirmation, seeing what I could do, seeing where I was at, and really helping me believe, gave me so much trust when I didn't quite have it. And then going out and then building that myself. So you're kind of taking turns almost to do that in partnership together, which is why having good clinicians and practitioners is so important. It's having people in your corner. And then
Hmm.
same from a mental perspective, I think that one thing I see is particularly helpful with people I work with is developing their own kind of inner coach, or like their self-talk, to help them really stay in the present. So, I have one client who'll say, when he feels that worry about the pain, just right now, I'm okay.
Hmm.
Like right now, I'm okay. And it's just coaching yourself back. And it's not denial, it's just rewiring that alarm response to threat so you can kind
Hmm.
of stay in the present and then build it bit by bit and not rushing it back.
And it is certainly something that I do see, more often in bone stress injuries, and than versus other running injuries is that, yeah, is that fear, but unfortunately with, phantom pain of
Mm,
pains in the areas then when there's nothing wrong. And, I've certainly had patients where we've scanned them and it's like, well, no, that's all clear. We're all good.
mm,
But still this, this pain and this doubt can still exist. Do you think that with, I guess, bone stress injuries where that's so unique, is it the image of the runner, it's thinking, oh, bone, something's really bad, something's broken. Like
mm,
what is it, do you think, about that particular type of injury that makes that more likely to happen versus others?
mm. I don't know. You probably have an interesting perspective on this. I think
Mm,
partly it's I think people have been really spooked by the fact that, it's a break in the bone, but it's
mm,
not, you might not feel like you'd imagine that to feel. So it might be that it was detected after a pretty, minor sensation. So
mm.
then they feel that slight sensation in that slight area, alarm bells
Yeah.
go off.
Yeah.
And often I'll have physios say to me, like, oh, I've got this patient that the only way I can calm them down is by giving them an MRI, but they've come in for so
Yeah.
many MRIs.
Yes, I
And so
know.
it's like, okay,
Yes.
how do we, that's such a fair and reasonable response because
Yep.
it's really pulled the rug on their whole lives.
Yep.
And so how do you really start to tune in and notice?
Mm,
And then, clinicians will have different ways of managing this as well, like be it writing a little pain diary, like putting those sensations down and knowing what you're looking out for, or having things that you say to yourself, having an agreed like limit when you might check something out. There's all sorts of different ways, but often I've noticed as well, spending some time processing past injury experiences and really giving them space to understand why is this so scary
mm.
can be very helpful to help someone stay present and feel that they can tolerate or manage some of those scary feelings that come up. But of course, even as a practitioner, working therapeutic like on the mental side, I'm really cautious too. If someone's saying to me, "Oh, I'm feeling pain," I'm certainly not in a position to say, let's just ignore that. So that's
Mm.
why working with alongside or in a team with um, physical practitioners is so helpful because they can say to me, no, no, we've done the scans. Like there's actually no, I'm not nervous about
Mm.
where they are physically. And it's also important to say it doesn't mean it's in their heads either. It's literally a neurological response.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they are getting pain signals,
Mm.
but to try and work with that won't be damaging. But
No.
it's helpful for me to believe that too.
Well, and as we know from pain science, we don't need tissue damage to experience pain. Pain is a is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
is
yeah.
a an output of the brain of threat. So when it's feeling threatened, it's what's going to express. And it's not just, I wouldn't say it happens in bone stress injuries as well too, but certainly, other long-term persistent injuries, things like a lot of tendinopathies, where
Mm,
people can develop that fear of using that leg and or that arm, whatever is injured, but also the how big reassurance can be. And I've
mhm,
certainly had patients where just simple reassurance of that's okay, or this is all right, and they're miraculously
mhm,
cured.
mhm,
That's
mhm,
enough for their alarm system to calm down. It's like I
mhm,
feel I feel better already, or getting that scan that's negative is again that confirmation to them, that reassurance that they
mhm.
sometimes need, don't they?
Yeah, for sure.
So if we go on to clinicians, so and again we spoke about before, and we've touched a few times today already about the work that you do with clinicians.
Mm.
Um, so we've got quite a few. As I said, we like to cater these podcasts to both runners and health professionals. What is it that you think that we're missing as health professionals? From a mindset point of view.
Oh, it's a good question. I don't think you're missing anything in particular. I think what we know from the research is just that a multidisciplinary approach is really positive is just fundamental to positive outcome. So when someone's, we'll know from the biopsychosocial model or from other lenses that an injury is never just in your body. It's
Mm,
also a product of, as well, think of injury as a symptom to something. So it's a product of your mind and your emotions and your social context. So working alongside one another to understand why something's happening and what's keeping it there and how to get out the other side is, it takes a team. And I am not embedded in any teams, but I work in partnership with lots of really talented, fantastic teams, just to kind of first even just start this conversation. And I'll often find in starting the conversation, clinicians are hugely, hugely attuned to the emotional needs of their patients. This isn't about teaching anyone to do anything, and certainly not to be therapists. It's about building confidence in normalizing some of these conversations, and also
Mm.
seeing it as our role to make sure people are properly supported, and that doesn't need to be something that is stigmatized. And the more comfortable and competent we are in having these conversations, then that really does kind of exude out to our clients and patients too.
And we've spoken about injuries, a few times today, but and some of the responses that are not normal. But what is a
Mm.
normal response to injury for our patients, our runners,
Yeah, what a good
if there
question.
is such a thing?
I don't know. I kind of think if running is a really important part of your life, it's completely normal, understandable, expected to find it hard to adjust to an injury. Whether that's a niggle that you think might threaten something you've been working towards, or a longer term injury that has suddenly sidelined a bunch of hopes and dreams that you had. It's normal to feel grumpy. It's normal to feel a bit lost. It's normal to feel a bit irritable. It's
Mm.
normal to not know what to do with your time, to be annoying your partner or your friends. These are all things that are
Hmm.
normal. And then there's ways to harness these things. So, you can almost put a little lasso on them and get them. Like, that's completely normal. You don't, just because they're normal, it doesn't mean you need to live with them. It doesn't mean they need to grow arms and legs. It doesn't mean they need to take over the whole story. But
Hmm.
if you're experiencing some of those things, yeah, you are human, right? You are human. Something really important to you has been taken away. And I often think of this kind of idea that a problem is only a problem. Like any problem you have in your life, it's only a problem because it's getting in the way of something that's important to you. So you might have a friend who has a knee issue and they can't run. They don't care because running's not important to them. If it's important to you and something's stopping you being active, of course that's going to be hard. So I would say all of those things are normal. That doesn't mean they need to take over.
Excellent. And with in terms of we spoke about when runners and patients present to us, and
Mm.
how can we validate that the distress that they might be having without
Mhm.
pathologizing it.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I
when
always like to do this with the clinicians because I should say, like, you're an expert in talking to your patients. I'm not, right? You know exactly how to talk to them. But this conversation came up with Bo, the stress fracture physio, the other day, and he was saying some ideas that I love. So maybe I'll share some of those.
hmm,
One of them was around just the power of normalizing it, as we say. So whether you're doing that around something more generally, like it's really normal to find this quite hard. People with an injury like this, bone stress injury like this, that would be really normal to find it hard. And I've no doubt you'll get through it. And right now, it would make sense it would be hard. It might also then be normalizing it that one step further of exactly where they are in that process, or even picking up on some of the language that they're saying, but just really getting alongside them, like, hey, I see you. It doesn't mean you need to open a whole can of worms. I think you can say,
yeah.
I'm here to support you with the physical side, and probably really important that you have people in your corner from a mental and emotional perspective too, just to set you up for success. Like, the language doesn't have to be frightening or scary or sad. It's just about building a team to help you come out the other side as strong and as capable and confident as you can be. And so, yeah, normalizing it and then really framing it in terms of helping someone set themselves up for success, I think are some of the common things that come through that are helpful for people.
And you through your work with clinicians, what is it that they hesitate, to bring up that emotional side of the
Mhm.
injury? Does it feel like that there's something not, that they're going to all of a sudden have their whole life story dumped on them that they're
Yeah.
not equipped to handle, or
Yeah, I mean,
what do you find?
you'll have ideas on this. I find this
Mm.
super interesting. The one is definitely that, yeah, you are working really skillfully in a limited period of time. You have
Mm.
often not that long at all in an appointment, and being wary of opening up lots and lots of emotions as well as information is so understandable. Uh, and I think you don't have to, but that would be a valid fear. Another thing that I hear a lot, which has really surprised me, but I totally get where it's coming from, is this fear that if I bring up anything to do with a therapist, anything to do with how you're feeling, it might suggest to someone that it's in their head. So I've had to work really hard with people on this to go, okay, but
Yeah.
like that would be one, like, well, there's so many different parts of that, but that I know is another fear of kind of insulting someone. And then
Mm,
the third thing is, our own responses, where you have to work, and you'll anyone who's a clinician will completely get this, how hard you have to work to regulate your own nervous system when
mm,
you're with someone who is dysregulated.
yeah.
And naturally, in our appointments and sessions, people are going to be feeling emotional, they're going to be feeling wobbly, and that will look like all sorts of different things. Sometimes that's getting angry at us. Sometimes that, I'd say actually probably you guys much more than me, that might be getting angry at results, or feeling frustrated. It might be suddenly breaking down, feeling sad.
Crying.
How
Yep. I've,
crying?
I've certainly
Oh, how do you
certainly shed
respond to
shed
that?
tears. It's like, oh gosh, that's
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard. It's
So those
hard.
kind of co-regulation strategies of how do I just anchor myself right now? I can hold that. I can say to them, I see where you're coming from. I'm not gonna try and fix it in the moment. I'm gonna give you a second, and then you can move on, is uh so important. I actually have a phrase book on some of these things that I don't know if we can link or something, but it gives
Yeah,
some
for sure.
language around some of these things that are really, really commonly experienced by clinicians.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely put that in the show notes. And if there were, a simple sentence that health professionals could use from
Mm.
tomorrow to open up a conversation, is there some sort of cue that you'd recommend?
Well, you know what? I'm going to do another plug
Hmm.
for what I think it was Tom, one of your guests, said on a recent
Oh yeah, Tom
episode.
Gurm. Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
loved what he said around if you were your phone battery, what percentage you at right
yeah, yeah,
now? I
yeah,
thought it was so powerful because
mm,
you can also then build on that. What's draining that? What's
yeah,
recharging you? And then do you have the support system that you need? And
yeah,
is there anything else that can help set you up for success?
yeah.
And I just thought that was such a neat way of asking. So I would throw that back to him.
Mm. And then going on from that, then if we think that someone isn't coping and that does need help,
Mm.
is there something again we can sort of say? It's like I hear you're having this much difficulty. Would you like to speak to someone? Is that sort of what you'd recommend? How you recommend broaching that topic? Or
Yeah, it might be
yeah,
saying lots of people in your position find it really helpful to have someone in their corner from a mental and emotional side, just to really understand what's going on right now, and again
mm,
to help you. It might be normalizing that you've had other people find that beneficial. It might be, if you know a particular therapist in your network like me, or there's other people of course as well, who you trust, that's super helpful. Like, hey, you should talk to X person, I think you might benefit from that. And also, I know other clinicians do this too. I do just a free 15-minute chat, and I think that can be really helpful for people, just to, like, there's literally no barrier to doing that, or much less barrier to doing it. But yeah, I think just checking in on someone's support system, and if they are at all interested in just having someone to really help set them up for success from a mental and emotional side.
excellent. We'll put all the contact details as well too in the show notes too. But
Mm,
you're also doing working with practitioners in that reflective practice, and
mm,
and we mentioned before about the facing the emotions that we
mhm,
all experience as clinicians. And
mm,
you know, from a personal point of view, I've never really, got close to burnout, but I think early on I felt, an incredible obligation to fix people, that it was
yeah.
up to me to help people, and that really would get upset when things didn't go, the way that I wanted them to, and,
Mm.
blaming myself for not doing that. What toll does this take, working with injured athletes, and what toll does it take on the practitioners?
Yeah, it's huge. It really is. And, high performing athletes and humans often turn to high performing clinicians, and they often struggle with the same high bar. Everyone is up against that same high bar. And that might have you, working hard, wanting to do more, maybe overrunning slightly, maybe adding an extra client or patient in that day because you want to help, and just overstretching in order to show up for other people. And that's so natural, right? We are human beings and we want to be helpful and we want to make sure we are pushing that standard and learning and learning and learning. There will always be more to learn. And I
Mm,
often think just coming back and going, trust yourself in that room. Trust if you are tempted to overrun, trust you have already done enough in that
mm,
time, right? Like, and that's the same message for everyone. Ultimately, we are all doing plenty. We're
yeah.
all doing enough, but it's so inviting to try and give that extra little bit more. And that's when I think it can all kind of seep into a murky territory where you have no breathing space for yourself.
Mm. And so something that practitioners can do to stay psychological well themselves.
One question I'm asking at the moment, which I know is relevant to people I'm working with too, is my schedule serving me?
Hmm.
And some people don't have huge control over their schedules. It might be that there are, KPIs and objectives within the
Hmm.
clinic. Most people have some more agency than they realize.
Hmm.
So, am I giving myself enough little breaks? When am I noticing I'm booking that extra person in when I might not want to? How are my days off currently fitting with the rest of my schedule? What am I doing in them to recharge? Just noticing. The first stage, I think, is noticing. How is this serving me? When I've had a slightly better week, what did it look like? What was different? And that, I think, can be very helpful as a starting point.
Well, we've had a lot of great information today. We're nearing the end. We do have a listener question from
Mm,
James actually, and James asks about the challenges that an aging or like myself, a masters
mm,
runner, can
mhm,
have in comparing themselves to their younger selves and their younger performances.
mhm.
Thoughts on that?
What a good question. Out of interest, what have you found helpful so far then?
I've found from seeking other goals. So whether that's, again, if PBs are something of the past for my runners, and I'm at the point myself personally where I could still achieve some PBs if I worked hard towards those, but that
Hmm.
time will come soon too for me. And I'm sort of again reflecting on that myself, and I think I've got joy from races and again with runners that I coach in setting goals for a race. It's like, well, you're in particular shape here. How about we strive for this? And if we get that, and I've seen the satisfaction that they get and that I also get as well too from doing that. So I
Hmm.
think it doesn't always have to have, an all-time PB, but just setting yourself something that is a challenge, and
Mm,
that achieving that gives you satisfaction.
mm,
So
mm.
that's what I've found
Yeah,
I
I
found
love
useful.
that.
But yeah,
I love that. And also, I think just broadening the scope a little bit, like within the sport, how can you show up in a way that gives you meaning? So, for
mm,
instance, it might be that you're pacing someone else. It might be
yeah,
that you're like one of my most favorite things I did last year was volunteer at the Sydney Marathon.
yeah,
And, who knew that could give you such an amazing feeling of being part of something. And then within the running itself, I think, and aside from those goals, specific goals that you mentioned, I often find it helpful just to think, a lot of people don't like this question, but if I wasn't to get any faster, like if this was me, right, and
mm,
I've hit my fastest times, how would I structure my week?
mm,
How would I structure who I'm running with? Would I change anything? And
yeah,
ultimately, you often in zooming out be like, oh, I'm still chasing. I'm still
yeah, yeah,
chasing, but I'm never hitting. So actually, would you be doing as many hard sessions a week, say? Would you actually be adding in another bit of connection? Would you be running somewhere new?
mm,
Would you be mixing things up? Because ultimately people run because they love running, usually, right? And then this endless quest for self-improvement can be a grind and it
mm,
can chip away at the edges of what we actually love. So sometimes I think it's a good exercise for any of us, reconnecting. Why is it that I run? Who do I feel great when I run with? Where do I feel the most alive when I run? And mixing up some of those things. And maybe if you've done a lot of road running, it's like, actually, maybe I'm going to hit the trails a little bit.
yeah,
Maybe it's
yep,
about if you're always running on your own, you're going to run with a group. You're going to just noticing what is it that brings meaning to running right now? And is that
mm.
still what it was 5 years ago? Or do I need a little software update?
I love that, and there's been a couple of things that jumped to mind with that too. One, You mentioned with the pacing, and that's something I've done the last couple of years
Mm.
as well too with Melbourne Marathon, and absolutely loved it. And it's something I'm going to continue to do. And the great thing about
Mm.
that is that as you get slower, well, you just go to a slower pacing
Yeah.
group,
Yeah.
and also offering to pace my runners in time trials as well too. So just
Mm.
seeing the joy that others get, and the finish line of a race is such an amazing place, isn't it? There's
Mm.
happiness, there's disappointment, there's tears of happiness, there's tears of joy. It is just
Mhm.
such an incredible place to be, isn't it? That
Mhm.
finish line, and to be sort of involved in it, even not racing yourself, but trying to help people get there. It certainly gave me a good sense of self-worth.
Mm.
And the other thing you mentioned too about changing, like I had a runner recently, and she's been you know just off the edge of achieving some PBs in some road races, and feeling a bit burnt out, and we've made a switch to trail running, and she's loved it.
Mm.
Taking the
Mhm.
pressure off expectations of time. Like there's no time here. You just push yourself hard, and still a sense of achievement that comes with that, but not the pressures of time. So I
Mm.
think that's the beauty of our sport, that there's so many things that you can do in it. It's not just about getting fast times, is it? It's there's
Mm.
lots to gain from it. Um, so if we were to wrap it up, and sort of going into some when to seek help, and some final reflections before we go
Mm.
into our quick fire questions. But how do runners know that when their injury distress is more than just normal frustration?
I think if it matters to you, it matters. So if you
Yeah.
feel like you're stuck or you're boring yourself or you're trying to suppress how much you think or talk about it to other people, or if you feel like people don't get it, you're not on your own.
Mm.
And whatever you're feeling won't be unusual. It can just feel pretty lonely. So that's always a good sign, I think.
Signs that suggest that someone should speak to a mental health professional.
Yeah, some of those things, and also I think just asking yourself, like, would you like something to feel different? Do you feel a bit stuck, a bit isolated? This is true for general therapy as well, I'd say.
Mm.
Do you want to feel more skillful in how you manage something, maybe in your life, in your relationship, in your injury? Again, it's not about being broken. I think reaching out is very much about taking the wheel. It's about reclaiming a sense of agency, which is often stripped from us in an injury, especially.
And they might be the same, what you just said then, the same questions, but for a runner that is currently injured and questioning their identity, the
Mm.
same questions you'd turn to them.
I'd say I'd just say it's so valid and understandable what you're feeling right now. Like being injured is the toughest training block of them all. And it often feels like when you're in it, you're going backwards or you have nothing to show for that time. And soon, at some point, you will see that none of those things are true. But right now, the fact that you're feeling that, if you're feeling that, is completely understandable. So yeah, I'd go back to that idea of noticing what ingredients you need to feel good and get curious about other ways of meeting them whilst running can't do that for you. Um, and I'm also just reminded of this quote that British comedian Sue Perkins said about being gay. She said it, but she said, being gay is the 47th most interesting thing about me. And I think that's probably true for runners too, right? We hang so much on that hook, and actually,
Mm,
there's so much more to you. So it's like, who
mm.
helps you reconnect with that?
So to wrap up everything that we've just spoken about, there's been a lot of things that we've covered
Mm,
there. But if we were to boil it down, and to offer your three, so Freya's three tips for runners, what would your three top tips be for runners?
mm. Connect, reflect, reframe.
Connect, reflect, reframe. Love it. And health professionals.
Yeah, build a team of people that you respect that can help you. And also as a clinician, like managing the work and also to help your patients. And a third one is trust yourself.
Hmm.
My guess is you're doing bloody good work, so well done.
And then we usually go through a few other questions as well, but probably the big one I ask from you: what's a myth that you wish would disappear from the mental space in within running?
Yeah,
What's
that
a
you have.
myth?
In running,
There's a misconception, a mental misconception that people have, that if you either you're weak, if you're not, you've got to push yourself, or
yeah, like yeah, that you Well, I'm going to actually go back to the therapy thing. I think that
Hmm.
you don't have to be broken or unraveling to have someone in your team to strengthen your mind.
Hmm.
And there are so many ways to strengthen your mind and soul.
Love it. Love it. That's such great information. And again, stuff that yeah, so as a clinician, we don't get exposed to enough of this. So hopefully there's, a few that are listening today that have gained some really valuable information out of this. And so where to find you, Freya? Where can people locate you? I'll obviously put in the show notes, but where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Reframe Sessions. I'm kind of taking a bit of a break, I will say, but I am there and I check my DMs.
Hmm.
Um, or reframe-sessions.com is my website, or Freya at Reframe Sessions on Gmail. So, or Google, email. So yeah, any of those ways, I will be there.
Excellent, Freya. Well, thank you very much for your time. I know I've certainly learned a lot today, and hopefully all our listeners have too. So you've been very generous, Freya. Thank you.
Thank you so much
And
for having me.
you're welcome. And thanks to our listeners. We'll see you on the next episode of the Rehab Runway.